This morning, I want to talk to you about a message that I've been preaching for 25 years next month, but this is the first time I've ever brought this message to a church. I've reworked a message that I have used in marriage conferences, but because of what we're watching in our culture over and over again, I want to talk to you about commitment. You probably heard about the 85-year-old man. By the way, that's my parents I hear, not my wife's parents. And this is my father's birthday, and that's why he's here. He's just 52, so we're all much younger than we appear to be. So, no, he's 76 and been a great role model for my brother and I, who's also in ministry. So sometimes people ask my parents, how is it that your sons happen to both be in ministry? And they say, we have no idea. I mean, really, we have no idea how God did that, but so you never really do know how God might be at work when you're raising your kids. You probably heard about an 85-year-old man who the doctor saw. It was one of his patients. He saw the 85-year-old man out on the sidewalk. He was happy as he could be. He never looked happy when he came to the office, but he had a really young, good-looking woman with him, much his junior age. And the doctor stopped him and said, "Sir, I've never seen you look any better. I mean, you're 85. I've never seen you look this happy ever." He said, "Well, doctor, you told me that I should go find a hot mama and be joyful." The doctor said, "No, I told you had a heart murmur. Be careful." Well, maybe he should have checked his hearing at the same time, but we're happy for him. But I want to talk to you about what commitment means. Now, my wife and I have been married for almost 35 years this year, which is really hard to believe that it went by. And so everybody who is married, so raise your hand if you are married. All right, now raise your hand if you're not. Now raise your hand if you wish you weren't. Okay, see, that's what we're going for here this morning. I want to talk to you today about commitment because I would almost guarantee that you are here today as a product of somebody's commitment. Somebody committed their lives to you as a child. They gave away their very life and committed themselves to you. So I'm going to ask you, now this is rhetorical, so what does commitment mean to you? And if I ask you to define the word commitment, how would you do that? What would you say the word commitment meant? We're going to see that in just a moment, and we're going to see how God has committed himself to us. So I'm sure that you might be here today because somebody did not give up on you. That somebody along the way, a mom or a dad or a coach or a teacher or somebody somewhere along the way saw something in you and didn't give up on you. Your parents may have not given up on you after you did some pretty horrible things. I was kind of like that as a teenager, yet my parents didn't give up on me in some very difficult times when I almost shredded our home as just a teenager and left a lot of problems that I have still faced even into adulthood. But God is good, and my parents have stood with me, and all these years, I am very proud of that. And I saw the commitment that they had. I played college baseball, and there would be some times I would look up in the stands, and I remember one time, although I don't recall where it was, maybe Kentucky, I was playing baseball at UNC Charlotte, and I remember looking up in the stands in some tournament, and there surprisingly were my parents and my brother. I didn't really want my brother there, but it was pretty cool that my parents were there. They had flown in little puddle jumper airplanes and flown to get there in time for the game where I was pitching. And you have to work hard to be able to do that kind of thing and spend your own money and all those kind of things. And so I've been committed to by people many times along the way. A few years ago, I had 6 surgeries in a very short period of time on different things. When I turned 50, somehow all of the things that ever bothered me also turned 50. And so I had a lot of surgeries. And after those were over, I was left with a lot of pain, a real lot of pain that has gone on for years, and I've just really now gotten it under control after the last 4 or 5 years. But I saw something in my wife during those years that I'd never had to see before. I saw a level of commitment in my wife toward me. She's always been committed that way, but I never got to see it like this. Now, she is a nurse. It's kind of her job to be committed to people's health, But sometimes nurses are not that committed to their own health, or doctors might not be, but they are often very committed to somebody else's health. And I don't think I ever had any more respect for anybody than my wife in those days when I was really in a lot of pain. And so I saw her give me a lot of compassion and not say to me, I wish you would just stop talking about it. I wish you just wouldn't bring it up. I never saw her do that. And I saw a lot of compassion from her for a very long time. And so as you think about commitment, you can probably think about somebody along the way, they stick out in your mind, who committed themselves to you even when you thought that nobody really should. Maybe you were just thrown out of your high school. Or maybe you got pregnant when you were a teenager. Or maybe something else happened to you, or you did something that made a big mess. Yet somebody committed themselves to stick with you through thick or thin. Now that level of commitment is disappearing from everybody today. That kind of commitment. So let me say to you, if you're over 70 years old, since you're one of the greatest generations our country has ever had, one of my fears is when your generation passes away, what happens next in the coming generations won't look like this. The level of commitment, the level of giving that they even give to people, to our churches, all that commitment may be gone. It may certainly look different. And so I want you to think of commitment as one of the greatest things of all time. So I want you to think of commitment. Now, since I teach on marriage a lot, I typically don't go to churches and teach on marriage. Since we do so much marriage work at conferences, I just usually want something different to preach on. But for some reason this week, I was really compelled to bring this message. And so here we go. You ready? I was reading a study a few years ago that asked this question. So whether you're married or whether you're not married, or whether you would like to get married or you are committed to somebody, a study asked this question over a 20-year period. Scott Stanley at Denver University asked this question: which couple does better in the long run? A couple who has a lot of romance, that sex is really part of their life, and it's a large part. They are their own romance movie. Which couple does better in the long run? The couple who has a lot of romance, or the couple who has a lot of commitment and they are really good friends? So you're already thinking up your own answer. And if you watch TV today or the movies, you'll probably get one opinion, but the truth is it's commitment. That the couples whose lives are commitment and not as much romance do better in the long run, almost twice as much. Where the couples are friends, they're not just married, but they also like one another. They don't just love one another, but they like one another. Now, how Scott Stanley came to this was over a 20-year period, his group called PrEP, which is a Christian Science group, basically, that tests out many things. And they were testing out marriage in couples. So they brought couples, about 1,500 couples over 20 years, into kind of a glass apartment. And there they recorded the couple's every move. Except for the restroom, they recorded everything they said, everything they did, everything. This was long before Big Brother came out on reality TV. They were doing this already. And after a while, the couple would just get accustomed to being, in this glass house, kind of this glass apartment. And they listened to them, they watched them. They watched the ones whose lives were really romantic, and they watched the ones whose lives were full of commitment. And after 1,500 couples over 20 years, it was not even close that the couples who had a lot of commitment did better in the long run and stayed married longer than any other couples. I think the reason is not really explained. The couples who lived out romance tended to fall in and out of love with one another a lot. And when the heat and the passion of the romance wasn't quite as strong, they tended not to like each other as much. And so commitment being one of the greatest things that you could ever have. So God has committed himself to you. Let me just say to you, God has committed himself to you, whether you think he has or not, or whether you think God is there or not, or whether you sense God's presence or not. God's word says that he had committed himself to you. And I'm going to give you a few scriptures that you can see up here. Matter of fact, I'll read this one to you. Commitment is doing the thing you said you're going to do long after the mood you said it in has left you. In other words, it's so exciting to do something, to make a commitment, isn't it? But after it wears off, now we've married a lot of people, and we have done a lot of marriage counseling, and we've done a lot of other things with married couples. And the most consistent question I've gotten after a couple's been married 2 years comes from the woman, and they usually come back to my office and they've said this thing: okay, Eddie, you got to really help me. Okay, tell me what's wrong. The woman, typically it's the woman who says, I think I married the wrong person. I believe that I did. Okay, all right, so tell me why you think that. And they'll say, you see, the feelings that I had before we got married, when we got married, the feelings that I had then, I don't have those feelings anymore. And so since those feelings have worn off, I'm afraid now I've married the wrong person because all those feelings are gone. And so I usually get a pause there and I say, okay, let me say something to you. Until those feelings wear off and you start living out a commitment to one another, you haven't ever really loved each other yet. Because you see, in her mind, it's a lot of the feelings. And when the feelings went away, she believed that the marriage was incorrect. Well, somebody needs to tell all young couples, and we try to when we're working with them, somebody needs to tell all couples this, that in-love infatuation feeling only lasts about 2 years. That's all it lasts, 18 months to 2 years, and then it wears off. And then what do? Do you go find somebody else? So if you went like this, well, my marriage partner has to make me happy. If you go by that rule, then you'll have to have a new marriage every 2 to 3 years. Because usually in about 2 years, this person doesn't make you happy anymore. And so if we use that as our guide for just, do you make me happy? Well, we'd have to keep getting new marriages. And by the way, doesn't our culture keep getting new marriages? One after another. I'm not picking on you if you're divorced. God loves divorced people. He just hates what divorce does to them. Let's go to our first slide. I might have to read this to you. It's a little small. Let's just see if God is committed to us. And it says in Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters be roaring troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling, Selah. Now notice in there it says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Now, I know when you're in trouble, it might feel like God is a long ways away from you. That's just your perception, but it's not true. It's just what you feel, but it's not true. Because God has committed himself to you in his word, and he can't back out of that. He's not going to run away. He's not going to divorce you. That God has committed himself, and God says that he's always there. Let's go to the next one, if we will. For it says in Hebrews 13:5, for Jesus said himself, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Now, how many of you, when you're going through a real tough time, that verse might run through your mind? It does mine. When I'm going through a really tough time and God seems far away, that verse runs through my mind. I just kind of think that verse. I know that your word says that you would never leave me nor forsake me. So what I'm going through right now is simply an illusion of my feelings. I know it's not true that you're not there. I know this is probably me that's created this, but I know that you've not left me for even a moment. Psalm 23, right before that, one of the most famous scriptures in the whole Bible. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For what, church? What does it say? For you are what? With me. Here's a famous black pastor who's now going to be with the Lord, and I used to love to hear him preach. He lived in Southern California before he went to be with the Lord a few years ago. And he's this enormous guy, this enormous African-American guy. He was probably in his 60s when this happened, but he said he was flying across the country to preach revival somewhere. But when he opened up his Bible, he just couldn't find anything to preach. God seemed so far away. He was thinking, here I am, one of the most famous preachers in America. I'm going to preach, and I can't find anything to preach on, and God seems so far away. But he said he just, on the plane, he said he did what you shouldn't do. He just opened his Bible, and it fell open, I guess because the pages were worn there. to Psalm 23, and the first few words he read were, "The Lord," and that was it. He was reading, "The Lord is my shepherd," but he said, I never got past the words, "the Lord." He said, I began to weep on the plain, tears ran down. I was trying to make sure nobody saw me, but he said, tears just ran down there because I realized on the plain that no matter how I felt, God was still with me. Let's go to the next one. Now, a few years ago when I told you I was sick and going through a lot of things, where I work at the Baptist State Convention in Cary, maybe like where you work, they'll send you out a get well card that everybody signs. And maybe everybody writes a few words. But one man wrote this one word in the card, and I told him later that no matter what anybody wrote, this one word changed everything. He wrote just one word. He wrote his name, David, and underneath it, he wrote the word Emmanuel, meaning God with us. Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. So God is here with you whether you know it or not. God is here in your church whether it's a good time or not. God is with you at work whether you feel it or not. God is alive and at work in your family whether it's a good time or not. God is with you. So if we're going to pattern our commitment after Christ, we should ask the question, has he committed himself to us? Has he committed himself to give his very life away to you? He demonstrated at the cross that he did do that, right? You can never take away the fact that Jesus died for you. No matter whatever happens in your whole life, you can never take away the fact that the Bible says that Jesus died for you. Now, it even gets better. He didn't ask you to clean up your life first. He said, while we were still sinning, he died for us. You know, it's pretty hard to commit to somebody when they're doing the wrong thing. Maybe you raised teenagers. How many of you have raised teenagers already and would never do it again as long as you lived? Okay, us too. We have, by the way, we have a great plan for getting rid of your children. This is how we got rid of both of ours when they were 19 at separate times. We moved and left them in the last city where we were, and they didn't follow us. And that is the exact truth. Our son was about 19, and he was so dense about what was going on that we were living in Charlotte. We were moving here to this area in 2008. He said, I know that y'all are moving to the Raleigh area. Can I just stay in our old house? Oh, wait. We owe a mortgage on this house. He went, well, could I just stay in the house without you? No, son, what's wrong with you? You would have to pay for the house. But he was thinking, I'll just stay here. And he did. But he couldn't think. But some children test the patience of your commitment so far. There are people, I was reading a book by James Thompson one day where a woman wrote in about her daughters who had given their whole bodies away to other men their entire lives. And the lady wrote in her letter to James Dobson, I would rather my daughters be dead than gave away their body to Satan every day. Now that's a pretty tough thing to say, isn't it? Because as parents, we love our children with a passion and would do almost anything for their welfare. But I got to admit to you, sometimes it's really, really hard, isn't it? If you've got children at home right now, you might be struggling or understanding, or with a grandchild, what's really going on there. So there used to be a lot of little incremental signs about how we committed to one another. When I was in high school, what you did was you took your class ring off that you paid for, or your parents did, and you gave the girl your ring. Now, every time I did that, I always watched to see where the ring went. Was it on her finger the next day? And then sometimes, if you really liked the girl, you took off your letter jacket and you gave the letter jacket. Now, I had no intention of letting them keep it. I was just really letting them borrow it. But what we were doing in those days was giving them a little step of and a little sense of our what? Commitment. Now, kids wouldn't do that today if their life depended on it. Well, because they don't have letter jackets anymore, and they probably don't have a class ring. Unless it's on their telephone, they don't know anything about it. And so, they give their lives away through their phone. But we used to give away little tokens Oh, I can remember my first girlfriend in the second grade. Her name was Robin Porter. Cute little girl, lived next to the Methodist church, but that's another story. So I remember going to the store, and for about 99 cents, I bought her a friendship ring. Now, I'm in the second grade, and I can remember giving that little second grade girl, I remember giving her a little token of my commitment in the second grade, because I thought we'd get married in the third, but my mother wouldn't let us. She always blocked those marriages that I wanted early on, because I would have got married in the third or fourth grade. My mom just wouldn't let me. She could see that I needed to wait just a little longer. But see, all along, I can remember giving girls little tokens of my love, or my commitment somehow. We didn't know what love was. I can remember not actually giving just Robin Porter a little cheap ring. I can actually remember giving a number of girls along the way little tokens of my affection. So what, if you're my age or a little younger than me, what did you ask girls or boys in those days? Would you go steady with me? Would you be my boyfriend? First of all, it started in the fifth grade when you wrote a note. Do you like me? Yes or no, check one. We really did do that. Did you do that? Did you do that? And girls, when you were in about the third grade or fourth grade, did you start writing your first name and some other guy's last name? Did you do that over and over again? You're about the third grade, so now you're thinking about getting married. You're writing your first name, his last name. You tried them all on over and over and over again. You tried them all on, didn't you? Yeah, that's right. The one who laughs the loudest did it the most times. That's exactly it. And you did it all the way along the way. But the reason was because you were thinking of this future commitment and how goofy his name sounded next to yours. It just didn't sound right. But didn't we do that? Now they don't do that kind of stuff anymore. They just send nude pictures of themselves on their phone to somebody that they might like. And that's really unbelievable, isn't it, to us or to any of us, that anybody would do that. But they do that now, I guess, as a token of something. But commitment being one of the most powerful words. And then when we got married, I didn't give away the little 99 cents ring. I bought a real ring. Well, it was pretty little, but I bought a real ring to give away. I was just a college student, didn't have any money. And actually, I earned the money to buy Janet's engagement ring from coaching boys basketball at the Methodist church. What's odd was we never actually played a game. I just coached them, but we never had anybody to play. We were undefeated, but we just never had any. It's true. It's really true. And I remember going to the jewelry store in Gastonia, North Carolina. We lived in Charlotte. I can remember walking in the jewelry store. Now, you're talking about a different day of commitment. I had about half the money it was going to take to buy the ring. I never met them. I didn't have any credit, of course. And so I remember saying to the jeweler, that's the ring I want, and here's the money. And when I have the rest of the money, I'll come back and, get the rest of the ring. And I remember the jeweler saying, this was 1979. I can remember the jeweler saying, no, you take the ring with you today. Well, I didn't pay you everything. You want me to fill out a credit application? No. I trust you that when you get the rest of the money, you'll come back and pay me. And I thought, is something wrong with him? Because I could take this ring and never come back into this store. I didn't fill out not one thing. I took the ring with me that day, so fascinated that a man who didn't know me would trust me to take this ring with me. And I remember thinking when I went back and I gave him the rest of the money in a few months, I was amazed that he had made a short-term commitment to me after hearing my story about why I wanted the ring and why I was a poor baseball player at UNC Charlotte and didn't have any money. And he actually gave me the ring that way. Commitment is a different thing. So when I gave Janet the ring, that little sign, that little token that I was committing my life to her, she didn't go, well, that looks so little, Eddie. It's probably not very significant, is it? Is that what she thought? Oh, no. The diamond was so small, you actually needed a magnifying glass just to see there was something in the little thing there. Now, about 2 years ago, she was cutting the grass, which I hate, and that little bitty diamond fell out of the ring, and she was crushed. It's in our yard somewhere. It's truly in our yard. But now I had a little more money, and I could go buy her something a little nicer. But I can remember along the way saying, I'd really like to buy you a nicer ring, as a sign of my commitment. And she would always say, I don't want a nicer ring. The ring that you gave me, that's the ring I want. Well, you see, that kind of commitment, it wasn't about money, was it? It was about something in our hearts toward one another. There are a lot of little incremental steps that we go through to show people that we are committed to them today. So I want to give you just a few instructions about commitment because I want to ask you today, are you still a person that lives by commitment? Our parents and their parents lived out commitment. They might have owed the guy at the general store a lot of money for some crop they planted, and the guy at the store trusted them to bring back the money when they made a harvest. That's the way the world worked often. A man's handshake was really his word, was his bond. Well, commitment, the reason it's so tough today is because commitment means making a choice to give up other choices. So at the bottom of commitment, what you're saying is that I'm giving up all other choices. This thing I've committed myself to, that is my only choice, and I'm cutting off all the other choices. You know, Jesus must have thought that. By going to the cross, by coming and going to the cross, he's cutting off every other choice he could possibly make for the way that we would get saved, that we would face redemption. Well, this explains why marriages are so difficult today, because we don't like to give up other options. Now, I don't say this in any way that's meant to be derogatory. You would have to know us. But our son has lived with two adults. He's 28, I guess. He's lived with a couple different women. He has two children by one. He's never gotten married to either one of those. You may have a child just like that. It's actually very typical of our day. When I want to sit down with him over a period of time we have, and we've talked to him about why not get married, why not give these children the daddy that they really want. Well, one of the things you can hear is it's not the money part. It is expensive. It's you have to give up all the other choices, don't you? You have to give up all the other choices. And more couples fear committing in marriage because they've seen so many fail. And I think that this is my generation's problem and the generations before us problem. They let so many marriages fail. No wonder the next generation doesn't want to make a commitment in fear that their marriages are going to fail too. In a way, I don't even blame them. But little do they know what they're doing. Little do they know that this lack of commitment toward their children is going to create a whole new generation of children who know nothing about commitment. Nothing. Commitment is very hard. We see it. If you watch TV and you watch the movies, the second problem behind commitment in young couples today is that I just read that 94% of all singles believe that there is one soulmate for them somewhere on the earth, and they have to find that one person to marry, and if they don't, they've made a terrible mistake. That there is one soulmate, and if they don't marry them or find them, it's just not going to work. So they continue to look for them on and on and on again. Even if they've married somebody else, some people are still looking for their soulmate. Now, is a soulmate a biblical thing or a real thing? It's complete hogwash. Because the Bible never says anywhere that you are to look for the one person. But the truth is, you should be the best marriage partner you could be, whoever God brings you. Oh, there was a time in a season generations ago when people didn't get married for love at all. The people actually got married because somebody needed to take care of them and support them. I did a little study about 8 or 10 years ago. I went and looked for every book that I could find on love and romance written before 1900. In English, I found one. In French, I found more than that. But in none of the books I could find were they hardly about romantic love at all, that the love and the commitment they made was to take care of somebody. Maybe they lived on a farm, and the only way to do it was to have a family there intact who's working on the farm together, who's planting crops together, who's giving away their life, and it was all about commitment. If it had romance, wonderful. That was great. So the question is, if you're looking for that one soulmate and you don't find them, just say that is a real thing. The problem is that you probably have somebody else's children right now. They're not your children. You married the wrong person, then you have somebody else's kids. Well, that explains a lot about our kids then. So if you want our kids, please line up and you can take them home with you. And so if you really married looking for one person, but you marry the wrong person, Then you probably have somebody else's children, and they have somebody else's children. And then one person, it just takes one person to mess up the whole chain of soul events. Well, you can see how ridiculous that really is, can't you? How ridiculous a soulmate version of romance really is. It's not found in the Bible. It doesn't even make good sense, because if your soulmate lives in West Germany, but you never go to West Germany, how would you ever find them? Or if your soulmate lives in a completely part of America, but you never see them, you would have to tear across every part of the country to look for your soulmate, and then you probably didn't find them anyway. Well, we can see how commitment, not a soulmate version, is really what God is after. In contrast to all the things that we read about this, I want to read you the difference in commitment between men and women. Now, I'll have to read this to you. It's too much for me to remember this. In researching commitment and sacrifice in marriage, they've been finding great differences between how the average man and how the average woman operates. How the typical man feels about sacrificing for his wife or girlfriend is strongly linked to his commitment to the future with her. Think of sacrifice as all the small, medium, or large acts in a relationship when one partner gives up something for the other without resentment. Now listen very carefully. If you wonder why you have a son who might not commit to the family that he has, listen to what they've said. A man tends to give most completely to a woman once he has decided, she is my future. So once he's decided she is my future, then he starts sacrificing and gives away commitment. In contrast, the research shows that women begin sacrificing when they developed a strong emotional bond with a man. And this explains a lot about how women can fall in love with somebody on the internet that they have never seen before. Men typically don't do that, but women do it a great deal. So in some relationships, this means that the woman will give up a lot for her man long before he does the same for her. And after years of sacrificing, she may end up shocked to find that he simply won't commit to her. Now, you might think what I'm about to say doesn't fit in the message, but I think I would be wrong to bring a message like this and not say this to somebody who may be sitting in the room. Maybe you came here today and you're thinking about ditching your commitment to your spouse. You're thinking that maybe this is not right, and I've married the wrong person, and I've never really loved them all of my life. We've been married all these years. I've really never loved them, and I'm thinking about just doing all the way with this and just ditching them and going and being happy. You've made a life out of integrity, but let me say a few things to you if that's churning away into your mind. First, I want you to think seriously about the alternatives. First, I want to remind you that you are not married to that person. Your mate, your children, and other people are going to feel pain that you will never, ever understand. They will feel a great loss if you don't make the right choice. Some of you could be right on the line of making a choice that's very destructive. Secondly, I think this has helped couples more than anything we've said to them. If you're thinking about flirting with somebody at work, going to a hotel with somebody at work, a next door neighbor that you're not really married to, I want you to see, number two, I want you to see your spouse doing the same thing that you're considering doing. I want you to imagine your spouse doing exactly the same thing that you're considering doing, and I want you to ask yourself, how do I feel about that once I imagine my spouse doing that, what I'm thinking? Third, think about the loss you'll experience in your friends, your parents, your church, and people that love you. 4, consider the life that you've already lived together. Do you want to throw away all those things that you've built together over some temporary feelings of infatuation? What about the photo albums that you have in a drawer somewhere? What about the wedding pictures that you have? On our kids' birthday, they're 28 and 29, and I've done this even since they were little children. On their birthday, I go and get out all their baby albums, and I lay them all out because I love to look at those. One of the things that bothers me about our phones today is, who is going to print out all those pictures that you have in your phone? How will you keep them for years and years and years? Well, most people don't. They're just there. They'll get deleted. There won't be those kind of pictures. So if you have albums full of pictures, they are pictures of your commitment to one another. So if you're thinking about doing something outside of this relationship that you have, go look at those pictures. Open them all up. Imagine the feelings that you have. Let yourself feel the feelings that you felt when those pictures were taken. Imagine the scene that was all around it. Imagine the things that were going on. Number 5, think about the loss of respect you're going to receive from the people who used to trust you. Number 6, this is what a man said to me in my office one day not long ago. He said, I've had to think about the fact that I can never undo what's been done. He said, I'll never be able to say that I was faithful and honest and true. For the rest of my life, I'll have to say that I wasn't. If you're in ministry or want to go in ministry, I'll save the last one for you. If you are in ministry and you break your commitment to your spouse, I want to go ahead and tell you, you don't have to call me since I'm helping pastors across the state. Don't call me and ask me this question. You will lose your ministry. You will lose your work. You will lose your income. You will lose the respect of family and friends and all the church members along the way who trusted you and had such respect for you. The people that you've married won't even feel that they are married. The people that you've led to Christ might not even feel that they are saved. The people that you've led to Christ and baptized will want somebody else to baptize them because you were tainted. And if you don't believe that, I've heard that repeatedly from church members. Even though there's grace to cover this, and your children will forgive you, and your parents will forgive you, somebody will tell the story about it as long as they live. I was listening to a 75-year-old pastor, maybe 10 years ago now. He was telling the story about growing up in a pastor's home. What a great pastor his father was. This is James Dobson's cousin, H.B. London. Many of you will know him from listening to him on the radio. He's been the pastor to the pastors in America for the last 25 years. But he said growing up, his father was such a great preacher. His dad was such a great family man until his dad had an affair with a woman at the church. Now, in H.B. London telling the story about his father, that story was over 50 years ago when he was telling it. I heard him tell the story so many times, it was as if it had just happened in his life. You see, even though he's really revered his father, the lasting story about his dad is about how he fell and how about he lost his commitment to HB's mother. So they're in a very large church, a church of about 2,500 people. He comes home from school the next day, and his mother said, "Son, we're going to have to move." He was in about the 6th grade, and he asked his mom why they were going to move. Why are they going to leave this church? Why is all this happening to us? She said, "I'll let your father tell you." And the next day, his father told him, and they moved from this very large California house and this very large California church into a very small house because he had gotten fired. I have pastors all the time who call me and say, "Can you help me find a church? I can't find a church to pastor." Why? "Because I left my last wife and now I see the error of my ways, but I don't know what to do." I say, "I'm really sorry, but I don't have a church for you. I wish that I did." Commitment is such a powerful thing. Most of the people who come to church week after week are there because they've made a commitment to the Lord Jesus Christ. They've committed themselves and their life away. They've given something away for Him. I want to give you just 2 kinds of commitment, and then I want to show you a video, just kind of to top off. So if you guys will get the video ready, we're going to show that here. There are 2 kinds of commitment, and I want you to know what they are. One of them is called dedication. That kind of commitment is really, really great. It's an internal state of devotion to somebody. It's something motivating you on the inside to stay connected to somebody, to commit to them. It's a force pulling you forward. You want to do it even though it's tough. Now, that's called dedication. Constraint is exactly the opposite. Constraint is a sense of obligation, that you have to be committed to somebody because you're obligated to them. You might not love them, you might not even want to be with them, but you made a commitment to them and you are obligated. See, Dedication pulls you forward, but constraint pushes you from the back. Now, my parents, good parents, we did it too. We gave our kids chores. And I can remember we had chores, to go do some of those chores, I really wanted to cut the grass so bad when I was little. So when I was 8, I just asked my dad over and over again, can I cut the grass? Please, I want to cut the grass. So when I was 8, he showed me how to cut the grass. Well, that was a pretty sorrowful day, because from that day forward, from the age of 8, I had to cut the grass. Not that I wanted to, but now I'm obligated. I got to go do it. Now I got somebody pushing me who's saying, listen, you wanted to cut the grass, son? Now go cut the grass. I got other things to do. And you see, now I'm obligated and somebody's pushing me. Now, if you've got both of these in your marriage and in your relationship, you've got something really, really powerful. If you've got a sense of dedication that makes you want to go and commit yourself to somebody, and you got somebody who's also pushing you to do it, you get both those together. It is very, very powerful. A lady, kind of a strange lady, I have to admit, in one of our other churches who played the organ, I never could quite figure her out. She was a little bit of an odd duck. You know any odd ducks? Oh, I know lots of odd ducks. Well, she was a good odd duck. But when we came to the church there, it's a fairly large church, when we came to the church there, she told me a story. Now, she's in her mid-70s, almost 80. She had been sleeping in her father's house next to his sick bed, his deathbed actually. She'd been sleeping on the floor next to his bed for the last 5 years, taking care of him. Now, here's a 70-some-year-old woman sleeping on the floor next to her father's bed to take care of him. And she took care of him 5 years, day and night, before he died. And I remember thinking about her, who would do that? Some of you already have done that. You might not have slept on the floor, but you took care of somebody until the day they died. I'm really afraid of what the next generation is going to do. We're going to ask them to take care of somebody till they die when they've not committed to much. I think they still have to learn what commitment is from us. And every time we let them down, we drive a nail in this thing called commitment. A lady, and then we're going to watch the video right here. I was preaching a revival in a church about 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the weirdest things happened I have ever seen. After I finished preaching, a woman came down here and met me, and she said, well, I just want to tell you a few things. I said, okay. She said, I think I might have made a mistake with my child. I said, well, what kind of mistake? She said, well, my child's about 12 or 13 now, but when she was 8, I just thought to myself, I think I'm done raising her now. I don't think I need to really do any more raising her. So I just gave her to her father. Now they live together. I just kind of gave her to her father to raise from that point on. And I don't really talk to her a whole lot. I certainly don't participate in the raising. She said, I'm not sure exactly why I thought that age 8, I just needed to let her go be. But she'd have to listen to you preach, though. I think that's a mistake. Now, if I had time, I'd really like to sit down and find out what made her think that an 8-year-old could deal with her own life. Could you imagine that? Well, I told you that story to tell you, some of you this, that some of you right now at an inappropriate time in life and age are about to let go of a commitment that's going to be devastating to somebody. Would you make a commitment? Would you make a commitment like this couple in the video that Janet and I found? I want you to watch them and watch his commitment to her and see what you think about this. You may have to give it a little bit of volume. They speak in British accent.
I don't count it a burden, whatever, to have to care for her. I need to do everything. From the moment she gets up to the moment she goes to bed, I do absolutely everything. Clean her teeth, shower, dress, everything. But it's a privilege. I count it a great privilege to care for this one that I've loved all of these years and continue to love. This is the year where we'll celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. Our stories have been a lovely story. I first saw her when she was 8 years old, and her brother became my best friend. We grew up together, and as we grew up, yeah, she was there, and I knew that she used to stare at me when I was playing footy with a brother and another friend, and when we used to ride bikes, and she kept staring at me, but I wasn't interested. I was 17, she was 16. I saw her dolled up, dressed up, and she had an A-line dress on, and boom, it was gone. She was the one for me then, absolutely. When we first started dating, I used to ride my bike from where I lived to where she was, and that was about 5 kilometers on a Saturday afternoon, because it was the only chance we had to get together. And it was hair wash day for her, and she used a special cream in her hair for a shampoo, and I can still smell it because that smell was so particular, so nice. It was just absolutely special. We had a bike. I used to ride everywhere on my bike, and then Glad had a bike as well, and we put a baby chair on the front of her bike, and so we carried our babies around on the bike with her as well. So yeah, bike's been part of our lives, and I guess that has something to do with us now. Around about 2004-05, I began to notice that there were things going wrong. She was finally diagnosed with the horrible disease of Alzheimer's. Having lived overseas, I knew that with a bike you can do lots of things. So I had a bike made, a bike chair made. We take it to the beach and ride along beside the beach. And as we do that, we see a lot of people come talk to us because it's a unique thing. Nobody else has got a bike chair quite like that one. I am determined to care for her every need, every need. You see, God has loved us so unconditionally. And I understand that God has put his love in my heart. And because I realize how much God has loved me, that's how I too can love my lovely wife. She has done so much for me over all of these years. Now she can't, but I can, and I can return her love. And it's a love that, well, to me, means I can do everything for her. She's my princess, I'm her William, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Would you have it any other way? No, not at all. We love each other.
Well, if that doesn't move you, you're heartless. Can you do that? Have you already done that? I think forward at the age we are, I'm thinking 20 more years down the road, if I believe my wife could take care of me perfectly. Could I do that though? I don't think you can unless you love and commit along the way over long periods of time, that you keep loving and committing all along the way. So those of you who are young and you're newly married, we have to tell you that the best stuff is yet to come. It just might not look like it to you, but we promise you, the first 50 years must be the hardest. And after that, it looks different. My wife is going to come and sing. What I would really like for you to do is I want you just to sit where you are, and I want you just to bow your head and close your eyes. I want you to allow the Holy Spirit just to say to you whatever he says in a message like this. I didn't bring this as a very polished message. I didn't even want it to be that way. I wanted it to be in a way that maybe that you could hear something in a kind of a different way, a little different, about what commitment really is. Some of you have experienced some supernatural commitment from somebody and from the Lord who met you when you were really a deep sinner, who loved you anyway, bought you with his own blood, and you're so appreciative. Now he wants you to take that same kind of grace and give it away to somebody else, really, a mother-in-law who doesn't like you, a father-in-law who you can't get along with, a parent you just can't see eye to eye with, or a child that you fought with their whole life. But yet commitment being the chief middle of all of these things that God has done, don't forget that God has called you to commitment. Commitment that comes out of his love for you and your love for him. Would you just listen as Janet sings? Would you just listen? Allow the Holy Spirit to do what he does best.